I'm well. How you doing? Nice to see you.
I see you too. Yeah, it's been good. It's been good.
I'm glad to hear. So I appreciate you taking the time today. I know it's a busy day, as I said earlier. So um, I'm just going to get right into it, if that's okay with the three of you. I know that we have limited time. I also appreciate you speaking about the new film, Akilla's Escape, which is going to have its premiere at TIFF as part of the Planet Africa program. So I'm really grateful to have you all three. And also, I'm going to avoid questions about the plot because I think it's important that people see the film.
Mm,
And I just want to focus on questions that are more my own curiosity, but I think that other people might be interested in as well.
beautiful.
All right, awesome, thank you. So I'll start with Charles, just because I know this is a project of yours that's been, I guess, brewing for some time. So my understanding is that you were ready to maybe start the film earlier, like almost 10 years ago, I think. Is that correct?
Well, I started 10 years ago, and then by 2012, there was an opportunity of some financing moving into a place where things were looking a little possible, and then it collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
And then yes, and then I ran into some conflicts with trying to reclaim ownership of my own project. So that put me in
Right.
a place of a legal sort of moment of trying to get my project back. And once I got it back, and I made the decision that that I will only make this film when I know how to produce it myself. And that's part of the journey. It was part of a decision. It may have been a stubborn decision that I decided then. And I even went as far as saying I will not make another feature fiction film until I
Mm.
so yeah, it was quite a journey, but it was important that when you're young and you're a filmmaker and you're coming through the business, that there are a lot of producers that may want to work with you, but their intentions may not be in line with the best of for the project. And
Right.
sometimes when you're young and you're naive, you sign away a lot of your rights.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so it was a learning curve for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you waited, though, because I think the time is ripe and it's necessary in under current circumstances. And I think it's more, it might have a lot more meaning to a lot of us
Mm.
once we
Right.
sit. I
Yeah.
think so. I think so. So thank you. And I'm glad that you held off on that. So tell me a little bit about the characters and how did you envision the beautiful cast that you have? I'm so impressed with not just the gentleman here, but also the other Canadian actors that you have in the film. What was that process like?
That process was it was amazing for me. I've worked with a lot of the actors that were in the film uh,
Mm-hmm.
previously, and from the pitch stage, from the book before when we were raising the financing, it was interesting to look back at it and look at
Mm.
seeing that all the the eight actors that I had in those spots. One had to fall out because he had another job that conflicted, but I think there were two other actors that weren't the makeup. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it was incredible because from Olanuke, Ronnie Rowe Jr., Vic Mensa,
Mm-hmm.
Anisha Pendergrass, who I had my eye on her for a while, just also as an activist and as a human being and this person. She's Bob Marley's granddaughter, and it just so synergized that she was moving to Canada. you know,
Right.
and so Teresa Tova, who plays the Greek, Bruce Ramsey, who I worked on a television series with Thamela a few years
Mm-hmm.
ago. So it was it was amazing to have this cast, and Nicole Hilliard Ford, our casting director. She's the kind of casting director who looks in places that most casting directors don't.
I see.
They're not on the list or not with an agency. It's like the people out here don't exist, and that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
So she
Right.
her eyes and ears to on the community, and so that is the kind of help that we received in piecing this together with some of the other smaller roles too as well.
Great. So it brings me to the three of you, because the way that you set up the film from the get-go is you teach us a little bit of history in terms of what was happening in Jamaica in the 70s and the gang culture that started there. How did you work with Saul Williams here and Thamela as well in creating these roles, given this historical content that you had already created?
Yeah, I think, you know, in the writing of it, the script, I think we slaved over it for a period of time, and it was a lot of like, you know, in the opening montage of that, it kind of, you know, it was on the page, and we knew that we wanted a Bob Marley song. We knew that certain things were there that we want to give. Can't tell you how many times I went through that opening just to kind of get it to the essentials of giving a contextual context to the history. And so the fusion of history and story, we try to really put it there, and so that hopefully the actors will take it in, and then they can lift off of that and ask questions. But again, you know, Saul knows about this world. You know, Denisha knew about this world. Ronnie Rowe knew about this world. You know, Comfiore, who plays in this, he was just reading a brief history of 7 killings. And when you see the script, he goes, Charles, I'm reading this book, and this is Comfiore. Like, you know, and so people were actually engaging in some of this stuff. So it was really beneficial that way. Thamela as well, like he's a well-read young man who I think will do his homework and research, right. So, and fill in the blanks. So that's always helpful.
So Thamela, what was that like for you? I know you have a lot on your shoulders in this film with this dual role that we're not going to discuss too much, but in terms of the plot, but what was that like for you in preparation for these characters?
Well, I'd say that, you know, it's a lot of consultation. You want to be informed of, you know, why that intention, why that decision to the best of your ability. And then just, you know, soaking in as much information as you can, both through the script, because a lot is provided in that script. There is, you know, so many questions that get answered when you read it. It's very self-explanatory. Then all just the set pieces, the cast that just help you have that sense of intuition for how to execute the role. And then just the, you know, behind the kind of fine print detailed research that you need to look into in order to be like, you know, have the best chance of embodying that to the best of your ability. So like when you're doing 2 roles, I mean, like for me, I broke it down into 2 stages, first starting with Akilla and understanding that character from his point of view, from his point of origin, and understanding all of the factors that amount to who he becomes, being, you know, Saul's character, older Akilla, but also the influences that are present during his upbringing, understanding how how a person in that situation handles those kind of obstacles. And then understanding that this kind of reflects our society on a daily basis. You know, we have people in this position. We have people who have gone through this kind of thing, paying attention to history and how that's impacted the world, you know, seeing that from multiple perspectives that are available, that are readily available. So it's like when you access that, it just makes it very seamless, very fluid. All those pieces together, putting it as one makes it a very like fluid transition into understanding that. And then for Shepard, you know, who is, you know, as I don't want to reveal too many details, but
yes.
You know, Shepard, it's kind of like, you know, a new school, how it's happening in present day, not just how it happened in the past, but what's going on in our daily lives, seeing, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement as something that can support that reference, understanding that, you know, there is a very big real component to who this person is and where that character is drawn from. So there's a lot of viable examples as to how I can approach it, you know?
Exactly.
So that's...
Right, thank you. And for Saul, what was that like for you when the role came to you and knowing that you're going to have this young man kind of help tell your story in terms of the younger character?
Well, you know, I was really blown away by the script. I thought that Charles in Motion, like, provided a lot of like background story. Usually as an actor, you're looking for background story and raising questions about your character, about what they went through as a child, what the parents were like, all these things. And all these things are in the script, you know? And so it provided a clear enough glimpse into how this character was shaped that it was very exciting, one, to approach it as a character. On the other hand, you know, I met Thamela did we meet on set? No, we met before. We met beforehand. And I was very excited about, you know, what that meant. But of course, you know, like, I was not there in the moments when he was playing me as a younger me, you know?
Right.
On set, I mean, and so it was, you know, like you said, Thamela had a lot of weight on his shoulders, a lot, you know, and so I'm thankful that I didn't have to take all of the things that Thamela had to take into consideration, you know, in those regards. But on the other hand, because of our camaraderie and the vibe, you know, behind the scenes, what have you, we were able to spend time, and I know that, you know, Charles was looking, and, you know, for us to vibe and for us to feed off of each other's mannerisms and all of these things, and all the things that actually happened naturally and organically, but also out of necessity, happened, you know. And so, yeah, I think this kind of storytelling is inspiring. You know, I was always, you know, thankful for the first moment that Akilla sets eyes on the first role that Thamela plays. Well, not the first role, but the first time Akilla sees, you know, Shepherd, and what that triggers in Akilla. I was always very excited about what that moment not only symbolized, but what it would be like when we shot it, you know. And yeah, like I said, all the elements were there. They were all there. So it just, yeah, flowed perfectly.
And it's told beautifully on screen. I mean, I'm really curious to see how the audiences will react once it hits you, because at first it took me a second to see where you were going to take us, and it was quite the powerful journey, I will say that. So I'm looking forward to seeing it with friends. It's going to be a different experience. I know there's a lot more that I want to talk about, but I'm just looking at the time. I just want to bring into this discussion the literary references that you use, Charles, and I guess Motion as well in your writing. But, you know, we see the books on Akilla's desk, and I also know from the notes that there's a little bit of a connection to the Little Prince here. Did you bring this to Saul and Thamela when you talked about the characters, or is this something that you kind of just knew was there?
Yeah, I didn't really talk a lot about those influences to some degree. I felt like, you know, the Little Prince reference really kind of came as I was making the documentary. And it was almost like Jake and I talking. He's like, Charles, you realize that he always does these sort of interesting things. And I think it's like in the journey that sometimes projects call you and you're not sure why. And it just presented itself of this metaphor of, and also influenced the idea of casting this, you know, Thamela to play the two roles. Was, you know, with the Little Prince and this young boy or this child that appears in this desert. Is it a mirage? Is it real? Is it his younger self? But this child is supposed to teach him, take him somewhere as well, open something up. You know, I love the art of war. Akilla is Achilles. You know, the mythology. the mythology of violence and the politics, the warrior, the last stand, and his mother's name is Thetis. It's
Right.
you know, James Baldwin, the idea that, you know, this is the last book that we see this young boy with before he goes on, he makes his escape, you know. So when we
Right.
see him as a man and we come back to the story, that is the, you know, hopefully the thing that you see, that, okay, that was something that really shaped the way that he maneuvers in the world. So that, you know, again, I'm an advocate for literacy and
Right.
comprehension, and for us to read these stories because they speak to us and they're timeless. And you know, I think if we spent more time approaching some of this material,
Right.
I think, and really looked at it, then I think maybe the world would behave a little bit differently too. But so I want to remind that, and so maybe if someone even saw this film and said, "Hey, I haven't read Notes of His Son," that they'll pick it up,
Right.
or they'll revisit, you know, Art of War. They'll revisit, you know, the Iliad. So I think that's important for us in our culturally to have this plethora of stories that we can revisit.
Right. And I think it brings that.
I think when you go to a person's house, you look at what they're reading.
Mhm.
It speaks a lot to that person, that character, and what they read. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I appreciate that from a book lover perception here. So, you know, just bringing it back to Saul and Thamela here, because the two of you are here at the same time. You know, towards the end of the film, there's this powerful climax. You know, having been through, you know, the shooting and now seeing the finished film, you know, what does the story mean to you, especially in the context that we're living in now? And either of you could start.
I can start by saying, because I know Saul's gonna have a field day with this question, but I can start by saying that it's very indicative of what's going on. I think that, especially like that setup, but the intention behind that, or what I've been told, and you know what I found from that scene, is that the intention behind what happens is to sort of like represent this opportunity to kind of, it's like I'm now being released. It's like the character, it's come to this climax where you have this chance now to go and break the cycle and to change the outcome of this long pre-existing reoccurring pattern that happens on, you know, both a national scale. So like when you see that scene, there's a lot more going on than just, you know, the beautiful imagery and you know, the smoke and, you know, the the action. It's this whole, you know, this whole narrative exchange that takes place. So I think that, you know, it's very impactful, and how it reflects the ideal for what's going on, that we do not want to keep perpetuating these events. I think that's very important.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that Thamela states it, you know, beautifully, in that, you know, yes, the film is very much, you know, indicative of the times. It's raising that question of how do we stop cycles of generational trauma? How do we bring it to an end? How do we shift paths, you know? And what must we confront in order to do that? And so that's one of the things that's beautiful about a person like Charles and like Motion, who co-wrote the screenplay with him, you know, is that their, you know, their love of the community, their love of all the many sides of the diaspora, and their true questioning of what role, you know, can we play in not only questioning but stopping violence that is perpetuated not only against, you know, ourselves but our families, the women in our community, you know, like all of these things, and all of these things are in the film. And so yes, it speaks directly to the times. And but you have to remember that as Charles told you, I mean, like, he started writing this film a long time ago, you know, and we shot this film before the present moment, obviously. And so these are things that have, you know, resonated in the heart. And so what's wonderful also is that the times have caught up to this form of storytelling, so that, you know, I think that that people are ready for it.
I think so too, and I'm glad that you're doing it through our local festival. So I'm very much looking forward to it. As I mentioned, I'm not going to ask what the future of the film looks like after TIFF, because I know we're living in uncertain times. But I thank you all for your time, for your art and your words. And I will shout out the soundtrack, or the score, I should say, because it's amazing. So it's very good. I think the whole production was just really, I don't know, I can't say, it's just hot.